So picture this. Imagine a nation that's completely stripped of its weapons, just living in constant fear, literally hiding in the shadows of their own land. And then, out of nowhere, a massive, against all odds victory completely changes the game. Well, that is exactly what we're looking at today in the ancient text of Judges chapter 5, famously known as the Song of Deborah. Honestly, it is one of the most epic, poetic, and intense victory songs in all of recorded history. Today, we're going to break down this incredible poem. We're not just skimming it either. We're going to walk through the text clearly, simply, and strictly verse by verse in chronological order. We'll see exactly what goes down, who the real heroes are, and why this ancient song still hits so hard today.
Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Judges chapter 5 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, context and the hook. 2, praising God and volunteers. 3, the brave and the absent. 4, the battle and Jael. 5, the enemy's defeat. And finally, 6, life lessons and recap.
All right, section 1, context and the hook. To really appreciate a song of triumph, you first have to grasp the sheer desperation that came right before it. You really can't understand the joy of this victory without feeling the terror of the oppression first. So before we jump into our verse-by-verse journey starting in verse 1, we need to take a quick look at verses 6 through 8. These verses flash back to the incredibly dire situation in the land of Israel before Deborah stepped up. The text says that in the days of Shamgar and Jael, the roads were abandoned. Travelers took to winding paths. Imagine that for a second. The main highways were entirely unsafe, just crawling with marauders and enemy forces, so everyday people had to sneak around on back roads just to survive. The text clearly states village life in Israel ceased. On top of that, the people had turned to new gods, bringing war right to their own city gates. And the most terrifying detail, the text asks, was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? The answer is a hard no. They were completely disarmed, totally vulnerable, and just living in absolute fear. So let's establish exactly where we are in the story. Looking back briefly at the context from chapter 4, Israel had been violently oppressed for 20 long years by Jael, a Canaanite king, and his ruthless military commander, Sisera. Now, Sisera had 900 iron chariots. That was basically the ultimate ancient weapon of mass destruction. In response to the people's cries, Deborah, a prophetess and judge, summoned Barak to lead an army, and against completely impossible odds, God gave them a massive victory, entirely wiping out Sisera's army. Sisera himself fled on foot and was ultimately killed. And that brings us exactly to chapter 5. On that very day, Deborah and Barak sing this song to memorialize this unbelievable miracle. Moving right along to section 2, praising God and volunteers. Let's look at how this magnificent poem actually kicks off. The immediate focus of the song isn't actually on the clash of swords. It's about acknowledging where the real power comes from and honoring those who had the guts to show up. Verse 1 tells us plainly that Deborah and Barak sang on that day. In verse 3, they call out with this immense authority. Hear this, you kings. Listen, you rulers. I, even I, will sing to the Lord. It's a massive public declaration of God's supremacy over any earthly ruler. Right out of the gate in verse 2, the song declares when the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. This is such a profound statement. Notice how Deborah and Barak don't start by bragging about their own tactical genius. No, they commend the leadership that stepped up and the ordinary people who willingly volunteered to fight. They recognize that when leaders guide courageously and people unite selflessly, well, that is a moment to give the ultimate praise to God. And this brilliantly illustrates how the song connects this current victory to God's historical ultimate power. In verses 4 and 5, the song shifts to this absolutely spectacular imagery. O Lord, when you went out from Seir, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai. Deborah is reminding everyone that the God who is fighting for them today is the exact same God who revealed himself with earth-shattering power at Mount Sinai. It's a vivid, plain reminder that their help comes from the creator of nature itself. Plus, this imagery of the heavens pouring and clouds dropping water, it perfectly foreshadows exactly how the battle's going to be won later in the chapter, through a massive flood. After recalling the terror of those abandoned highways back in verse 6, we get this beautiful self-description from Deborah in verse 7. She says that village life had ceased until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. Notice, she doesn't call herself a warrior queen or some kind of tyrant. She calls herself a mother. This simple term beautifully clarifies her role. Think about it. A mother protects, a mother guides, a mother restores order and safety to her household. Deborah arose to nurture and fiercely protect her people when all hope seemed completely gone. And because of her faithful leadership, verses 9 through 11 tell us her heart is deeply with the commanders of Israel who offered themselves willingly. The song literally invites absolutely everyone to join in the celebration in verse 10, from the wealthy riding on white donkeys and sitting on rich saddle blankets, all the way to the ordinary people just walking on the road. Verse 11 paints a picture of singers and archers gathering at the watering places. What used to be places of deadly ambush are now safe spots to rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord. How amazing is that?
Now for section 3, the brave and the absent.
As we move into the middle section of the chapter, the song turns into this fascinating and honestly kind of harsh performance review of the whole nation. It serves as a really powerful roll call, evaluating exactly how each tribe of Israel responded to the crisis. But before evaluating the troops, the commanders have to rally themselves. Verse 12 is this intense, rhythmic call to action. Wake up, Deborah. Wake up, break out in song. Arise, O Barak, take captive your captives, O son of Abinoam. You can literally hear the urgency and the military drumbeat right there in the poetry. They are injecting massive energy into the moment. Following this battle cry, verse 13 notes that the survivors came down to the nobles. The Lord's people came down against the mighty, proving that even a small remnant, if they have God on their side, can face overwhelming forces.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how verses 14 through 18 highlight a stark and incredibly detailed contrast. The song meticulously lists exactly who showed up and who didn't. Ephraim, Benjamin, Machir, which represents Manasseh, Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali are highly praised. The text specifically notes that Zebulun and Naphtali risked their very lives on the heights of the battlefield. But then the song harshly calls out the tribes that were absent. Reuben had much searching of heart, which basically means they debated it extensively, but ultimately they just stayed among their campfires, listening to the piping for the flocks. Gilead stayed safely across the Jordan River. Dan lingered safely by his merchant ships, and Asher remained comfortably on the coast in his coves. The plain meaning here is a sharp, unyielding critique of those who prioritize their own commerce, their own comfort, and their physical safety over the survival of their brothers and sisters in their greatest hour of need.
That brings us to section 4, the battle and Jael. Let's move to and see how this builds as we reach the actual combat and the real climax of the narrative. The armies finally clash, but the way the victory is won is entirely unexpected. In verses 19 through 22, we learn the specific details of the battle at Tanith by the waters of Megiddo. The Canaanite kings came down to fight, fully expecting to take rich plunder. But the text tells us they carried off no silver, no plunder. Why? Because nature itself was turned against them by God. The poem literally says, "From the heavens the stars fought against Sisera, and practically on the ground, the river Kishon swept them away, the ancient river." Those 900 terrifying iron chariots we talked about? Completely useless thanks to a massive flash flood. The thundering hooves of the horses were left galloping in sheer panic as the very earth and water defeated the enemy forces. But before we get to Jael, verse 23 issues a really bitter and severe curse against a place called Meroz. The angel of the Lord says, "Curse Meroz bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty." It's just a stark reminder of the immense cost of cowardly inaction when your community is fighting for its life.
With his army entirely destroyed by the flood, the enemy commander, Sisera, flees on foot and seeks refuge in the tent of a woman named Jael. Now, verses 24 to 27 step methodically and deliberately through her intense, decisive actions. Verse 24 declares her the most blessed of tent-dwelling women. So here's what happens. First, in verse 25, when he asked for water, she gave him milk in a magnificent lordly bowl, lulling him into a false sense of security and a deep sleep. Second, in verse 26, she reached out her hand for a tent peg and her right hand for a workman's hammer. Third, as he slept deeply, she struck the peg entirely through his temple, pinning him straight to the ground. And fourth, he was utterly defeated. Verse 27 uses this rhythmic, almost slow-motion repetition to emphasize his total and final fall. At her feet he sank, he fell, there he lay. She took the plain, decisive action necessary to permanently eliminate the tyrant.
Moving to section 5, the enemy's defeat. Then, the song takes a brilliant, dramatic turn. It shifts our focus completely away from the battlefield and zooms right into the palace of the enemy. We're looking at the aftermath of the battle from the perspective of those who oppressed Israel. In verses 28 through 30, the song paints a chilling picture of Sisera's mother. Peering through the lattice of her window, she's anxiously wondering aloud why the thundering of our son's chariot is delayed. Her wisest ladies answer her, and she repeats to herself this haunting, cold assumption. Are they not finding in dividing the spoils? A girl or two for each man, colorful garments as plunder for Sisera. It is a massive moment of stark, dramatic irony. We, the viewers, know Sisera is lying dead on the floor of a tent. But his mother? She casually assumes he's just taking his time violently dividing up captive women and stolen colorful embroidered clothing. It utterly exposes the sheer cruelty, arrogance, and greed of the Canaanite oppressors. So the crucial point here is the incredible contrast presented in the final verse of the chapter, verse 31. The song concludes with a super powerful petition. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may those who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. It perfectly contrasts the dark, violent, and greedy expectations of Sisera's mother with the bright, shining, unstoppable strength of those who love God. The oppressors are swept away like dirt in the river, and the righteous rise like the morning sun. And the very last line of the chapter tells us the simple, historical, and deeply hard-won result of this epic event. Then the land had peace for 40 years. The terror on those winding highways was finally over, and village life could safely resume.
And finally, Section 6, Life Lessons and Recap.
As we take a step back from this ancient song of victory, we really have to ask ourselves, how do these events translate into our modern lives? Well, the plain meaning of this text offers us incredibly practical applications. Here are the key simple ideas we can take away to improve ourselves. First, volunteer willingly. Just like the leaders and people who were praised at the start of the chapter, true change happens when individuals step up and say, "Hey, I am here to help." Second, don't hesitate when you're needed. We saw the harsh critique of Reuben, who searched his heart but did absolutely nothing, the curse of Meroz, and Dan, who just stayed safely by his ships. When there's a crisis, don't just sit comfortably on the sidelines. Third, trust God's ultimate power. Just as the river Kishon swept away those terrifying iron chariots, understand that no obstacle is too great to be overcome. And finally, always give credit where it is due. Deborah and Barak sang a song praising God, the leaders, and ordinary people like Jael. They didn't take all the glory for themselves.
This chapter really leaves us with a mirror to look into. Look at the tribes. Look at Jael. Look at Deborah. They faced a moment of absolute terror and disarray. So I want to leave you with this question for your own personal reflection. When a vital challenge arises in your community, your family, or your life, will you be like the brave tribes who stepped up and risked it all? Or will you be like the hesitant ones who stayed safely by their campfires and ships?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.